Okay, thank you everyone for joining us for IGI Global's 2018 webinar, What Impact Does Diversity Play in Combating Predatory Publishing? The Unsung Hero of Combating Predatory Publishing, Diversity, hosted by Colby Conway, the Managing Editor of Journal Development. While everyone is settling in, I would like to tell you a little bit about IGI Global. For those of you who do not know who we are, IGI Global has been a leading international academic publisher for 30 years, with an ever-expanding portfolio of 4,500 reference books, over 175 highly indexed journals, and a broad collection of InfoSci databases. IGI Global is committed to providing the highest quality publications, excellent service, and has a steadfast pledge to the research community and underrepresented research. We currently publish in 11 different subjects, including business and management, computer science and information technology, education, engineering, environmental, agricultural and physical sciences, government and law, library and information science, media and communications, medical, healthcare and life sciences, security and forensics, and social sciences and humanities. This webinar specifically is in honor of the international campaign, Peer Review Week. This week highlights the essential role of peer review and that challenges everyone in the academic industry to highlight ethical publishing practices and create a better awareness around raising the ethical standards in the publishing industry. As a part of the 2018 Planning Committee, IGI Global is proud to support this international campaign, and Colby will explain a little bit more about our publishing processes during our presentation. I would like to let everyone know that today's webinar will be recorded and all attendees will be sent a recording of the presentation after the webinar. Additionally, attendees will have an opportunity to participate in a live session, Q&A session with the speaker at the end of the presentation. And you can enter the questions using the chat feature located at the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel. Feel free to type questions in as we go, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So now I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Colby Conway.
All right, thank you, Caroline. So like Caroline said, I'll be talking about combating predatory publishing exclusively by looking to increase diversity throughout the peer review process. So what is predatory publishing? Predatory publishing is an opportunity presented by a publishing venue that exploits the academician, notably by paying to publish, to have his or her work published. And what essentially that is just the publish or perish phenomenon. Many individuals in academia are looking to be promoted, whether they're moving from professor to an associate professor, they're moving their way up the ranks, or they're looking to become tenured. And there's a lot of times there is the thought that they need to publish more. So predatory publishers can come in and kind of exploit the individuals looking to publish by saying, here's an outlet, you can get your work published guaranteed, and oftentimes much quicker than going through a full-blown peer review process, to ensure that they have these records of publishing that they can put on their dossier when they go to look for promotion. As a member of COPE, IGI Global is committed to maintaining the highest ethical standards in academic publishing. So how do you spot a predatory publisher? So some of the things that you can watch for, and this is not a comprehensive list, these are just a few of the more notable ones, especially of what to watch for, as well as qualities of non-predatory publishers. So if you see a publisher saying they're offering unrealistically quick turnaround times, such as have your work published in 2 weeks or even 1 week, a lot of times even under a month, that should be a red flag to you. To go through a full-blown peer review process, it's going to take way longer than that. As I talked about in the last slide, paying to publish. A reputable publisher doesn't require article fees for standard submissions. That might not be the case for open access articles, as there might be an article processing charge for open access submissions. But in terms of standard submissions, there should not be a fee, or they should not have you pay to publish. Lastly, an unprofessional website. If you're noticing numerous spelling errors, there's grammatical problems across the board, or just anything like that, that should be another red flag to you. I'm not saying that necessarily makes it a predatory publisher, but oftentimes you can tell from the website, if, again, grammatical problems, numerous spelling errors, that perhaps it could be a predatory publisher. Lastly, some of the qualities of non-predatory publishers. So there's a clear explanation of the peer review method. Transparency is key for full understanding with the peer review process. For example, on IGI Global's website, we have a whole web page dedicated to our peer review process, as long as a video that clearly illustrates our peer review process. no fees to publish, again, not including open access submissions, and COPE affiliation. Members of COPE are required to uphold the highest ethical standards, and predatory publishers don't get accepted into COPE, or they don't become affiliated with COPE. So the importance of peer review. Peer review is at the core of reputable scholarly publishing and the driving force behind all IGI Global books and journals. All of our books and journals go through this peer review process. We operate under the double-blind peer review process. I will explain more about various types of peer review in a slide, I believe is the next slide. Reviewers are expected to maintain the highest ethical standards of scientific research. Later on in this presentation, we will talk about the responsibilities in the peer review process for both reviewers as well as editors-in-chief of journals. Under IGI Global's double-blind peer review process, numerous parties are involved, ensuring the highest ethical quality and standard of peer review. So like I mentioned, we talk about the types of peer review that most oftentimes we'll see. Again, IGI Global operates under the double-blind peer review, which is when both reviewer and author identities remain anonymous throughout the review process. In single-blind peer review, the identity of the reviewer remains anonymous, but the author's name and affiliation appears on the paper. And in open review, the identities of the reviewers and the authors are not concealed. Some other methods that have recently evolved: transferable peer review. It's currently being piloted at different publishers. If rejected, authors can request that the article, reviews, and a standard scorecard are transferred to another journal. There's also collaborative peer review. It's a more interactive form of review. An example of this is that the editors and reviewers would come together and discuss the paper amongst themselves. Lastly, we have post-publication peer review, which is when an article is already published online after an editorial check, and then reviewers are invited to evaluate. And many utilize a commenting system when employing this peer review process. So the responsibilities in the peer review process. So we'll start with the editor-in-chief. More information on this can be found on the IGI Global webpage talking about peer review. But with the editor-in-chief, they're responsible for organizing and maintaining an editorial board, which we like 8 to 10 associate editors and 30 to 50 editorial review board members that represent research from international institutions. Later on, we'll talk about the diversity and geographical representation of the review boards. Editors-in-chief are also required to utilize a minimum of 3 editorial review board members and 1 associate editor in conducting the double-blind peer review of each manuscript through the e-editorial discovery online manuscript submission system. And then lastly, collecting and organizing final materials for each issue, ensuring that every manuscript submission adheres to IGI Global's formatting and submission guidelines. So while there are responsibilities for the editor-in-chief, the reviewers also have responsibilities with this. And it's basically what the responsibilities for the reviewer are to evaluate the manuscripts in such a way that they provide an in-depth, high-quality review to provide to the editor-in-chief to help them make their editorial decision. So the reviewers assure the editor-in-chief that a manuscript is being published with integrity and accuracy, as well as evaluating manuscripts for the following: originality and significance of contribution, the interest to the research community and/or practitioners, international relevance, coverage of existing literature, satisfactoriness of methodology, analysis, and comprehension, clear, concise, and jargon-free writing, and organizational structure. Again, all the information regarding the responsibilities of editors-in-chief and reviewers is available on the peer review page of IGI Global's website. So the whole webinar is talking about increasing diversity in the peer review, and there's many different ways that this can happen. The first is location, specifically geographical location. So for a journal that begins with the International Journal of or the International Journal on, these review boards are to be very diverse. When manuscripts are being submitted from individuals all around the world, and some of these manuscripts will even highlight certain aspects within a certain geographical location. If a review board isn't very diverse, it could be hard for the reviewer to provide a quality review because they might not have the understanding of that particular topic area in the country that is associated with the contributing author. So as you can see in the image on this slide, this is pulled from within IGI Global system, but the international diversity of the review board for this journal is very strong. And what we consider to be very strong is that 10% or less of the review board, of the reviewers on the review board, are from the same country. So if you can stay at that threshold or below it, that represents a very diverse review board, which is very important in increasing the diversity of the review board, as well as the overall effectiveness of the entire peer review process. So again, how can you increase the geographical diversity of reviewers for your journal? We talk about the importance, but now we have to take that into how we can actually employ that for the review board, especially if you are an editor-in-chief of a journal or you have aspirations to be one at a later date. You can examine the review board and see what parts of the world your journal has minimal representation. At the same point, look at your review board or at the review board and see where there is overrepresentation, and you can always look to remove inactive reviewers and replace those individuals with eager and active reviewers from other parts of the world that your board doesn't have much representation from. You can reach out to prominent scholars in the field from various parts of the world, asking them to become a reviewer for the journal. And along with that, you can attend conferences around the world in an effort to network and establish connections with those around the world. Hopefully some of those connections can turn into reviewers for your journal or those interested in publishing, and they'll submit a manuscript. So we talk about location, so now we can talk about the research interest, specifically increasing the diversity of the research interest of the reviewers for the review board. So while numerous topics of a journal relate to the overall title, it's important to have a diverse review board with various research interests. So if we look at the image here on this slide, this is one of the IGI Global journals, and you can see all the topics covered for this particular journal. Not all of these topics are in the title of the journal. That would be a very long title. So this way, all the topics are covered are right here. So if you have one manuscript can be submitted on, e-finance, and then the next manuscript that comes into the journal could be on social network. The next one can be Web 2.0. It's important that we have a diverse review board by research interest, because you can nearly assure that any manuscript comes in that's related to the overall topic of the journal, you'll have a reviewer that has an expertise in that research interest, and you'll be able to guarantee numerous reviews from experts within that field to help the editor make an informed and accurate editorial decision. By doing this, again, an editor-in-chief can nearly ensure that there is at least a couple of experts on any topic of a related manuscript submitted to the journal. And the nice thing about our interface for those looking to become reviewers for IGI Global journals is IGI Global allows researchers as well as reviewers to input their research interests so that the editor-in-chief can ensure these individuals receive review requests tailored to his or her interests. Again, manuscripts can come from all different topics to the same journal, and having individuals with varying research interests allow informed, high quality, and in-depth reviews to provide to the editor-in-chief. So another way we can increase diversity in peer review is the stage of career, specifically for these reviewers. It's important to have a healthy blend of early career researchers and established experts on the review board. In some cases, these established reviewers could even serve as mentors to early career researchers. At the same point too, the research interest could be developing, and there's new viewpoints coming in that could vary from different generations, and having a healthy blend of both can provide varying viewpoints on this, and it leads to a more effective peer review process. The diversity of the board is enhanced not just by location, not just by research interest, but where different individuals are at in their various careers. And the way that you can do this is with individuals who want to be a reviewer, provide your CV. That way, the editor-in-chief of the journal that you wish to become a reviewer for is able to see, where you're at in your career. What have you done to this point? Do you have any review experience to date? At the same point, they'll be able to see exactly where your research interests lie, and at the same point, they're able from your CV to determine, where you're at in the world to increase the diversity for their journal in terms of location. As we just talked about with your research interest, they'll be able to see that, and now they'll be able to see where you're at in your career. So the overall importance of increasing diversity in peer review. So if we are able to increase the diversity by means of geographical location, research interests, stage of career, what we can do is add credibility for the journal and the publisher. through a transparent illustration of the peer review process for that journal and for that publisher, whether it be double blind, single blind, or any of the other options that we talked about, it provides credibility for the journal and the publisher. That way, there's no doubt that that publisher is not of the predatory kind. They reputable, they could be in COPE, which obviously adds a lot of credibility to that journal. And then again, it will lead to submissions and more interest in the journal. Increasing diversity leads to more effective review boards. Ultimately, for each journal, the goal is to get indexed down the road. And that leads me to the next point, a better indexing potential. So with every journal wanting to get the coveted impact factor from Web of Science or wanting to achieve inclusion into Scopus, an effective review board is absolutely key. One of the things they look for is a diverse review board. They look at a bunch of other factors too, including the quality of the content, the timeliness of the journal, and its impact on the research community. But without an effective review board, it might not be possible to pull out the most potential for those manuscripts. Having experts in various fields on the review board can ensure no matter what topic the manuscript comes in, it has an expert on that review board who is able to provide a high quality, in-depth review. This in turn leads to stronger manuscripts that go out for publishing, which from there go to more citation impact for that article, which leads to more citation impact for the journal, which makes this particular journal, more desirable for those that are on the review boards for those prestigious indices. Again, namely Web of Science, Scopus, EI Compendex, the indices like that. Again, increasing diversity leads to a more desirable publishing outlet. With the increase of predatory publishing that we are seeing, it's important that publishing outlets really look to add credibility to their name, to the journal's name, and just showcase that they're a desirable publishing outlet. You can go to IGI Global's web page where we have our Publish With page, and you'll see a video of why it's beneficial to publish with us. We're transparent in our double-blind peer review process. Just trying to pull out the key information about the publishing outlet in a snapshot that makes it desirable to those interested in publishing, those interested in reviewing, or those who just have an interest in the academic publishing industry. Increasing diversity will lead to all this. And with, again, all of the predatory publishing that is out there, it's imperative that researchers, that reviewers, and even other publishers are staying on top of the happenings that are going on, and that you are able to add credibility to your name. You're able to have effective review boards for your journal, getting journals indexed not only in the prestigious indices, but across the board in all indices, abstract services, and in turn makes it a more desirable publishing outlet. And then more individuals who are interested in publishing are submitting their manuscripts to reputable publishers and not predatory publishers. So that wraps up what I have. I believe the next part that we are going to have is a live Q&A. So if there's any questions, you can go ahead and submit those.
Okay, and as Colby said, we're going to go ahead and we have plenty of time for questions. So we are going to, if you have any questions, if you could please type them in the chat box below. And it does look like we do have a few questions that are coming down through. One of the first questions is, what type of diversity do indices value the most?
So based on the criteria of what indices look for, again, as I mentioned, they want high quality content that obviously adds a significant impact to the research community. If any of them are going to be the most important, I would say it is the diversity of the review boards in terms of geographical location. Again, as I mentioned through, if a journal begins with the International Journal of, the International Journal on, or whatever could follow suit from there, it's implied that there is an international focus on that journal, both in terms of the content that's being published from the journal, but also those that are reviewing for the journal. If we were to talk about a manuscript submitted on, e-commerce in Malaysia, if there's no Malaysian reviewers, it could be tricky to provide a full in-depth review on that manuscript because there might not be the inside information from being located in that country. But if you're able to have reviewers from all across the world and all different parts of the world, you're able to ensure that there's going to be an individual who is able to provide a high quality, in-depth review on that topic with a specific even if it has a regional focus or an international focus. So, I mean, all of them are important, obviously, in terms of stages of careers of reviewers, the research interest that they have. But if I had to pick one that's the most important, it would have to be the diversity of the review board in terms of geographical location and international focus.
Okay. Another question that we are getting is, how effective would you say that the double-blind peer review process is in upholding diversity as a standard?
So with IGI Global operating under the double-blind peer review process and being the managing editor of journal development, I'm able to see the double-blind peer review process on a daily basis. And I believe that it is very effective because there's no bias that can be introduced into this peer review process. Again, with the double-blind peer review, the author of the manuscript doesn't know who's reviewing the manuscript. The reviewer of the manuscript does not know who wrote the manuscript that's looking to be published in that journal. So with the two parties remaining anonymous, there's no bias that can be introduced. And many of the other ones do a good job of negating bias as well. But just with my particular experience with the double-blind peer review process, no bias is added to this, which leads to the most, impartial, high quality review that can be placed for that manuscript.
Okay. Other questions that we are getting is, let's see here. What do you do when you publish with a predatory publisher?
So if you find that your work has been published with a predatory publisher, what I would recommend is to reach out to that publishing outlet and look to either have the manuscript retracted or pulled from publication if it's still perhaps in that publication process. At that point, what you can do is then submit your manuscript to a publishing outlet that is not predatory. But if this were to happen, I would recommend too, along with getting it removed from the predatory publisher, is that you take it as a learning experience. I would take a look at the website of that publisher and take a look to see, maybe you missed one of the red flags. And obviously, with hectic times, sometimes things can be overlooked, but taking it as a learning opportunity, taking a step back, looking at the website, perhaps maybe you didn't notice that there was the fee to publish, or you didn't think anything of it. Just going back and using it as a learning opportunity, learning from it, and then ensuring that the next time you submit that manuscript or any manuscript, that due diligence is done to ensure that it's going to a reputable publishing outlet, not a predatory one. And another simple check too is going to the COPE website, taking a look at the publishers that are affiliated with them, see if that publishing outlet is on there. And if not, that could even be your first check. Take a look there and use that as the first step in determining the legitimacy of a publishing venue.
Okay, it looks like we have a few other questions. The first one is, someone would like a little bit more elaboration on finding diverse reviewers, specifically increasing diversity in peer review and location.
Yeah, so with that image that was on there, talking about how IGI Global determines what is a very strong review board versus strong review board. So again, we determine very strong to be 10% or less of reviewers are from the same country. A strong review board would be anywhere from 10.1% to 15% of reviewers are located from the same country. The next one would just be an average review board, which is about 20% of reviewers are from the same country, and it just slides down on that scale. Obviously, the goal is to have it be very strong, again, 10% or less from the same country. But it's important to understand with this too, that if you happen to be an editor of a journal or you're looking to be one in the future, overhauling a review board doesn't happen overnight. It takes time to find individuals who have been inactive in terms of reviewing or aren't in it to help promote and market the journal. Then you got to find reviewers to take over. And especially if you're going to look for that international focus and try to find these individuals from different parts of the world, it's going to take some time because you have to invite them to the review board. They have to join, and you start to get them conducting reviews and then eventually promoted to the editorial review board. So if you were to take over a journal, or if you do have one and you're calculating your percentages of where your reviewers come from in the world, it's important to understand to take a look at it right away, see where you're at, and then set legitimate deadlines to enforce that. Again, don't give yourself a week to overhaul the full review board to get it from 35% or from the same country down to 10. It's not going to happen. You just have to be diligent with it, set realistic timelines, and understand that it's going to take a little bit of time, but overall, all the work that's put in does make it more desirable in the end, both for the reviewers that are reviewing, those interested in publishing, as well as the review boards from prestigious indices that will be reviewing the content for potential inclusion.
Okay, and kind of going along with that, another question that we have is, how does IGI Global specifically help their editors in creating diverse review boards?
Yeah, so with that same thing, obviously we have the reviewer dashboard for our editors that showcases where they lie on the spectrum of the international diversity from the reviewers. Obviously, again, with that graphic, it showcases the percentage of reviewers that are from the same country. Additionally, if you look on the web page for any of IGI Global journals, you look down at the review board, you'll see the individual's name with their institution and the country that they're located in. This way, it's very transparent who the members of the review board are, and you're able to see at a quick glance where where all the reviewers are from. The graphic that was showcased is housed inside within our e-editorial discovery system that isn't outward facing for non-editors in chief of the journal, but it's something that you could always elaborate on. If you're looking to publish with a journal, or if you're reviewing for a journal, you can always ask the editor in chief for what exactly their percentage is, and that way you'll know the percentage of the individuals from where they're around the world. And just again, working to increase that will help. And that graphic that I pulled for the slide, that's a great tool for our editors in chief to use. And that way, every time they make all these changes to their review board, they can go back in there and see if it's made a difference for them. If their review board has bumped from strong to very strong, or from average to strong, or from below average to even up to strong. It's a valuable tool that our editors in chief can utilize to help increase their diversity of their review boards.
Okay, it looks like another question is, how long does it take from article submission to publication? And then also, how long does the peer review process normally take?
So this is a good question, especially if you're looking at a predatory publisher. Oftentimes what you'll see is we can take it 2 weeks from submission to publication, or we can do it in 3 weeks. We could do it in a month. Being a reputable publisher with IGI Global, we allow 12 to 16 weeks for the facilitation of the peer review process. And a lot of times from the time that it's submitted to the time of publication, we like to try to keep it within 3 to 4 months. A lot of times it can be quicker depending on the state of the journal, how fast the reviewers get everything completed. But again, we allow 12 to 16 weeks for the facilitation of the double-blind peer review process, because again, with what we request, we want 3 reviews from editorial review board members. Then after that, we want a review from the associate editor. A lot of times from there, what happens is revisions need to be made to address the concerns that were raised by the reviewer. And then from there, if it's accepted, it gets placed into an issue, and then it goes into the whole publication process. So just in short, 12 to 16 weeks for the facilitation of the peer review process.
Okay, another question is, how has the peer review process changed over the years?
So in some cases, peer review wasn't being conducted, and that's one of the big things with predatory publishing, especially if it hasn't evolved. And a lot of times for different publishers, it's whatever they find works best for them, for their reviewers, and for their brand and their credibility. Again, IGI Global sticks with the double-blind peer review process. We found that to be the best for our journals. And again, it allows for impartial reviews, because again, the reviewer does not know who wrote the manuscript, and the manuscript author doesn't know who is reviewing the paper. This way, there's no ties between the two. Even if there could be a tie between the two, but because it's anonymized, they don't know it, and they can't favorably say, oh, that's a fellow researcher at my university who wrote this paper, so I'm just going to go ahead and accept it, because at this point they don't know, or they don't know for sure, because the identities of the two parties aren't involved. So with the peer review process developing, it just really mattered to what publishers decided was going to be the best for them. Obviously, in that graphic that was showcased earlier on in the presentation that you're more than welcome to go take a look at, if you review the recording of this webinar, you can see the different types of peer review. And again, it just comes down to what the publisher finds most ideal for with their journals and for what they've seen has worked for them. And if depending on what kind of journal it is, if it's an open access journal, perhaps the review is better in the open peer review format or the transferable peer review format. Again, IGI Global operates under the double blind peer review process. We've just found that to be the best for our needs.
Okay, and it looks like we have another question going along the lines of open access publishing specifically. How does the peer review process integrate with the open access movement and the predatory publishing movement specifically?
Absolutely. So even with open access submissions, peer review is still conducted. Just because an author wants to make their manuscript open access doesn't mean that it gets to bypass the peer review process. With articles that are submitted open access to IGI Global, they still go through the entire double-blind peer review process, even as if it was just a standard submission. And then at the end, in the housekeeping stuff, is when all the changes can be made within the procedures for open access manuscripts. However, it still goes through the same peer review process. The author does not know who's reviewing. The reviewer does not know who authored the paper. And that's for IGI Global manuscripts that are submitted open access. Other publishers, since it is an open access article or it's a manuscript submitted to a full-blown open access journal, they might do an open peer review. It could be a single peer review. It could be transferable. But either way, regardless of a standard submission or an open access submission, a peer review process for a reputable publisher is employed on that manuscript. If you come across a publishing outlet that says, because it's open access, we won't review it, you just have to pay an additional fee. Again, that's what we talked about in spotting red flags for potential predatory publishers, if there is a fee for open access submissions. Now, with open access articles, IGI Global does ask for an article processing charge for open access submissions, but this is more for the subscription cost for the journal, and it just is able to open it up. So you'll see with a lot of publishers, standard submissions don't cost anything. Sometimes open access submissions do maintain an article processing charge. That doesn't make it predatory. It could just cover the company in terms of the subscription cost for the journal, because the open access submissions are made freely available to those who are interested in that open access content. But again, to take away from open access submissions, they still go through a peer review process, regardless of single blind, double blind, transferable, open, the post publication. There is still a peer review process employed on open access submissions.
Okay, we're just going to have time for one more question. Another question that came in, also to let everyone know, I know we had a couple questions regarding the recording and the presentation. A recording will be made available after the presentation, and also we will be sharing all of the slides as well and providing you with additional resources. But the last question that it looks like we are going to go ahead and take is, how do I go about increasing the diversity in my peer review board, if I can't afford to go to international conferences?
Absolutely. So while conferences are great to network and communicate with individuals that could serve as members of your review board, it's not vital and it's not necessary to do such a thing. Is it a great outlet for it? Absolutely. Does it help? Absolutely. But it's one of those things where, again, it doesn't have to be the only way you do it. You could do it through social media, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, just anywhere that you can communicate with like-minded individuals that are looking to serve on a review board and be a driving force in the overall success of a journal. That's a way to reach those individuals. You can, network with individuals at your university. You can talk to, and then obviously once you talk to them, then you can talk to those in their circle. If you can't afford to go to conferences or you can't afford to attend networking events, that doesn't mean that you can't increase the diversity of your review board. It makes it easier because you're able to talk to individuals in one set location and actually garner that face-to-face communication. But again, Social media sites have made it easy to communicate with people across the world in a very prompt manner. Listservs are another way to go about it, as well as individuals. If you publish in a journal, go ahead and reach out to those that published in the same journal as you, if you were actually publishing your research. But it's not necessary, and it's not the only way to go about it by attending these conferences and networking events. Again, it does make it easier, but it is by no means the only way to increase the diversity of your review board.
And also tacking on to that as well, utilizing the resources that are currently available at your institutions or universities, talking to colleagues within the industry, discussing with them on ways to go about, potential networking opportunities, and also talking to the publisher that you're currently working with as well. They'll be able to provide assistance in expanding your networking possibilities. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and end the Q&A session. For anyone who is interested in more information on this topic, please view the recommended publications outlining quality publishing practices. All of these publications are available at a 20% discount when you order directly through IGI Global's online bookstore.
On this slide, you can see that, again, I talked about this throughout the course of the presentation, but you're able to view our publishing brochure and company video at the link provided at the bottom of that page, www.igi-global.com/publish. It's a great way to learn about the authors, editors, publications, and major milestones that have helped shaped who we are today. Go ahead and take a look at that, and from there, you'll actually be able to go to a similar webpage and view our peer review process that explains in depth our double-blind peer review process. And for those that are looking to get involved with a journal or any of IGI Global journals, here's just a few links. If you want to submit to any of those 3 journals on the left, the International Journal of Robotics Applications and Technologies, International Journal of Electronic Government Research, and International Journal of Vehicular Telematics and Infotainment Systems, go ahead and click any of those links. It'll take you to a direct link to submit your manuscript. At the same point, on the right-hand side, you can apply to become a reviewer for journals such as the International Journal of Disaster Response and Emergency Management, the International Journal of Digital Crime and Forensics, and the International Journal of Sustainable Entrepreneurship and Corporate Social Responsibility. And if you go on the IGI Global webpage and you look at our calls for papers or the Become a Reviewer link, you can search through all of our journals to which you could submit a manuscript or become a reviewer.
Okay. And just to let everyone know that all of our journals are also featured on IGI Global's InfoSci database. This database is a collection of 175 plus scholarly journals that have been featured in prestigious indices, including Web of Science and Scopus. As a part of this database specifically, IGI Global is now doing an open access fee waiver. So for any library that invests in an IGI Global journal, IGI Global will match the library's investment with a fund of equal value to go towards subsidizing the open access article processing charge for their students, faculty, and staff at the institution when their work is submitted and accepted under that IGI Global housed within that collection. So as we all know, publishing resources takes resources from the publisher side and from the staff to the technologies, and therefore this program ensures that researchers have an affordable and quality open access publishing outlet, and it provides librarians and institutions with cutting-edge forward-thinking resources. And also, as Colby mentioned a little bit earlier, and make sure that when you do publish open access that you are publishing under a quality model. Recommend this database to your librarian today by visiting the URL www.igiglobal.com/InfoSci journals. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to our teams here at IGI Global, including Colby, our journal development team. If you're looking for more information about just publishing with us, feel free to reach out to the acquisitions team as well. Additionally, as you already mentioned, you can visit our Publish With page to learn all about our publishing processes and opportunities, and also visit our online bookstore. And as I said previously, all orders made directly through IGI Global are now 20% off. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time. And as stated, we will go ahead and send out a recording and the finalized PowerPoint presentation.